Studio guest this morning in our health club is Dr. Bright Redu, who's a general physician and a good friend of ours here on NewDay. Good morning, Doc. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm fine. Thank you very much. Now, the FDA gave a warning that palm oil sellers are selling palm oil that has been adulterated with what they term as Sudan IV or 3. Before we get into what's actually happened to the palm oil as a result of adding this particular material, what's the original purpose of Sudan dye 3 and 4?
Okay, so these dyes are used in biological studies, for example, to stain cells. When scientists are looking at tissues under the microscope, it stains the cells because the cells contain fat, and it's a fat-soluble dye.
Okay.
So it stays a long time in the cells and make work really easy. Then for industrial purposes, it's used to dye solvents, plastics, in manufacturing. And before 75 or so, it was used in food processing as to color food. But authorities found out they had health hazards, so it was banned. And in 1995, it was labeled as a carcinogen. Carcinogen is something that causes cancer.
Right.
It was placed in category 3, and these are things that cause cancer in animals, but we don't have human evidence yet.
Okay.
But it's still quite dangerous. So it's an illegal food additive and shouldn't be in any food.
Wow. Okay. Now, considering that we've already established that it's a carcinogenic, does that mean that as soon as it is ingested or taken into the body that you are going to get cancer?
No, carcinogenic agents require time because to cause cancer need to damage the cells and the DNA. I'm talking too much science, forgive me. So you need exposure over a long time.
Okay.
Say some agents require very short time, others require a long time.
Right.
Maybe like 10, 15, 25 years.
But it all depends on the concentration of how much they put in.
With chemicals, it depends on the concentration and the frequency that you take it.
And you ingest it.
So studies that were done, Sudan IV and the Sudan dyes, they work when you take into the body tends to process it into other forms. Sometimes it's split into different chemicals.
Okay.
And these chemicals cause the injury.
Right.
So far so good. Nobody knows the exact amount that you need to take. But this is not the first time it's gone into food. There was a case where hot chili pepper from India was colored with Sudan dyes, and it was detected in the EU, I think in Germany or so.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of education going on in regards to artificial coloring of food substances. So this requires frequent and then prolonged intake.
Okay. Now let's just say that you've gone to the market, you've bought some palm oil, you've come home, you've already had your meal that you've actually made with your palm oil, and then you're informed that unfortunately the dye that you just eaten was in the palm oil. Is there any particular first aid or first course of action that you would take at that point?
Oh, I there's no clear first aid outline. And I don't really know how long this has been on the market, but this was just in the UK, right? UK, a body in the UK found that palm oil that was being exported from Ghana, the particular brand, had it. So perhaps it's not been around too long, and people have not been consuming it for too long. So what you need to do is that it's difficult to get Sudan IV out of the system. Mm-hmm. But the good news is that Sudan IV itself is broken down into other chemicals that cause damage. And there are several detox agents that one can use to get rid of these toxic substances.
Okay.
Yeah. So one can do detox later on, but I don't think that a one-off when you take Sudan IV contaminated food one time, it's not going to cause cancer.
Right.
You need to have repeated intake for a long time.
All right. So, that's very important that everybody knows, because obviously we don't want to scare everybody.
Yes. So,
but the reason why the FDA came out with this is because obviously after a prolonged period of exposure, it can cause cancer. And 1% of a possibility of cancer is too much. So, they've taken it, they're trying to take it off the shelves at the moment. Before we get into how to distinguish between the one that has the Sudan dye and the one that is without it, what would be your advice to people who come into contact with carcinogens or things that have been added onto food? Because it's not only in palm oil. A few years ago we were talking about fish when there was formalin and the rest of it. Yeah. So what can people do when it comes to these things? You said detox. What kind of detox would you suggest? Just stop eating this particular kind of meal, or
Yeah, right. So for education purposes, countries who've gone through these things advise the people to avoid unreasonably cheap food.
Okay.
Some of the food, when you are buying, you know that it must be wrong.
Right.
Somebody gives you very fat fish that is so cheap, it should occur to you there's something wrong. And then natural coloring. Some of the Sudan IV, the Sudan dyes are not naturally occurring; they are synthesized.
Right.
So manufacturers may add artificial color. If you go to the market and you see this palm oil and this palm oil, obviously one looks redder than the other.
Yes.
And this is natural. This has been colored.
Right.
So people need to look out for artificial coloring. If something appears abnormal, you're not used to a certain color, you should question, and then look out for the price and then the source. If you have a regular supplier who you trust, it's safe than to test new markets.
Yeah.
So these are the advice that we give to people on reasonably cheap products, questionable sources, and then products that look off.
Right.
With regards to color. For detox, the number one detox agent is called glutathione, and that's what people would take to get rid of toxic substances, herbicides, pesticides, and other chemicals that are in the system.
So, Doc, we're looking at these two specimens of palm oil that we have here on our table. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, the one with the red lid, which seems to be slightly thinner in consistency, but more red itself, is the one with the Sudan IV and III dye, correct?
Yes, that's right.
All right. And the one with the blue lid, as you can see, seems to have more consistency, slightly thicker, more or less orange rather than red. That is the unadulterated, pure palm oil.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So if people could take a look at this. But how do we get to find out this information? I mean, those of us who go and eat at certain places, they may have been credible for all these years, but let's just say, for instance, we go and buy some red. And during the serving, all the rest of it, they put the beans, they put the plantain, and they give you that spoon of palm oil at the end of it. How are we meant to identify from that one spoonful whether we've got some of this or not?
Well, the Sudan dye test, to have a correct method, it needs to be done in a lab. So it has a chemical test that you do in a lab to identify. Right. So really, 100% guaranteed test to identify it has to be done in a lab. But other tests are, for example, the one that was published in the news. If you stain a white cloth with the dye, it will be quite difficult or impossible to wash it out with a detergent.
Okay. So
that's because it's a very strong staining agent. But if you did it with the correct palm oil, you could wash it out. Okay. So that's a sort of a home test.
Also a little bit later, because obviously you'd have to go home and test it as well.
I can't see you testing palm.
You know what? Maybe at Auntie Aquili's Bean Center, you're trying to do. You can't do it right there and then, can you? All right. But the major thing is that it's not going to cause cancer immediately. So it's going to be after an exposed period of time that it could possibly cause cancer. And the main thing is to look out for the color and the consistency of the palm oil as well.
Yes, and then buy from reliable sources and then question on reasonably cheap prices. Yeah.
All right. Doc, I want to thank you so much for coming in this morning. Hopefully we've educated you at home. Obviously this is a big issue, and we're trying to make sure that everybody is healthy as possible. We just want to take a look at the dyes one more time just so that we can let everybody know which one is the good one and which one is the bad one. We have the one with the red lid here, which seems to be a lot redder than the other. That does contain the Sudan dye 3 or 4, and as you can see, the consistency is slightly thinner. The one on our left side, or the one on the right of your screen with the blue lid, that's correct, slightly more orange, thicker in consistency. That is your pure palm oil, unadulterated.